Show and the Red Pills Project. Of course, you see it's myself and my brother from another mother, Josh. And we have an amazing show ahead of you right now. Josh, anything you want to say to your peeps before we get into this?
Yeah, I just got a notification. President Donald Trump is going to address the nation at 9:15 p.m. So in about 7-8 minutes.
Wow. How do we play this? Should we?
Well, so for everybody out there, we have the FLYNN interview, which we're going to be playing. And the FLYNN interview actually talks about how Donald Trump needs to address the nation. And I've been very active on social media today. President Trump, you need to address the nation. This was before the terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump just posted on True Social. I'll be speaking on the horrific attack on our great National Guard warriors at 9:15 p.m. sharp. Thank you for your attention to this matter. God bless America. And this was a terrorist attack on America. And so we're gonna. I think what we do is we go to Trump's speech, we give our dialogue, we play the FLYNN interview, we do our brief of the FLYNN interview because there's a lot that is covered there. There's guys, I'm telling you, his post yesterday with Digital Warriors and Get Ready. This was not coincidence. This is legitimate. This is all hands on deck. On what the general has to say about everything that's going on and things that Alpha and I have been talking about. This is very, very real.
Well, how about this? You guys are seeing me and Josh collaborate in real time. We're live right now for those you that are wondering, because we know Trump doesn't always show up on time. So just to keep the show in line with what it is, I think we do go to the General FLYNN interview, and then following that, we can always bring in Trump's address the nation afterwards. It'll give us a chance because we both got multiple screens that we can simulcast it to ourselves or watch it ourselves while the audience is doing that, and then we can discuss it afterwards. But I'm up for whatever. It just, my concern is Trump gets us waiting 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and this is about an hour interview that you guys are going to watch with us and the general. So what do you think about that one?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So with that, folks, get your notepads. Make sure you pay attention to everything. This is a very important conversation. Me and Josh are going to be watching it with you as we're monitoring what's going to be going on with the president and the address the nation. So we're prepared to address that afterwards. But I will say this. We got a lot more time with the general than we anticipated, which was awesome. Which was very, very awesome. So do us a solid, no matter what platform you're watching, share this out, get as many people to watch this as possible. This is an interview everybody needs to hear. And in about an hour, when we come back, if the president hasn't addressed the nation, we'll get right into me and Josh debriefing this conversation with the general. If the president has addressed it, we'll get into that conversation, I'm sure, first.
They're already live on the White House channel. It's in the standby mode, already live, waiting. I think it's going to be 9:15 sharp.
Well, then you know what? 5 minutes. Let's wait.
Let's wait and see if he comes on at 9:15. And let's talk about a few different things. Today, there was a gentleman, not a gentleman, a piece of shit animal, radical Islamic, Afghan is a country of origin, came in through the Biden administration, through our immigration program under the Biden administration, walked up to two National Guard soldiers and point blank shot them in the head with a revolver multiple different times. I want to actually tell you the story because Mike Davis actually posted on this. And he said, Afghan national born 1996, armed with a revolver, ambushed a female guardsman, shooting her in the head, and a male guardsman shot multiple times. They never saw it coming. Both guardsmen were armed. A major in the National Guard who was unarmed and doing his spot checks of the guardsman was in the block, heard the shots and turned to see the shooter who spotted him. He took cover behind a truck. The suspect came for the major, who pulled out his pocket knife and bravely took on the suspect, who was reloading his revolver. The major began stabbing the suspect in the head. Another guardsman in the area who was armed then drew his pistol and shot the suspect twice, once in the leg, once in the ass. The major stated that when the suspect began shooting, he heard him shout Allah Akbar. So he just Mike Davis says he was just briefed, and now you are too. There's more. We're trying to confirm if the suspect, an Afghan national, was an interpreter brought over by Biden because he was the Department of Defense record. Again, we're trying to confirm.
I'm getting the thing lined up to bring up on the screen here.
So this is, guys, this was a terrorist attack. I don't care what people are going to say, whether Trump comes out and admits that or not. This was a terrorist attack. Our military bases across the world have moved from ThreatCon Bravo to ThreatCon Charlie. Delta means imminent attack. ThreatCon Charlie means an attack has happened and posture has been raised. Now, is this the beginning of something? I do believe that this is directly related to the seditious six coming out the other day, which I believe is a scapegoat narrative. I think that they are trying to incite the Insurrection Act through Donald Trump, which I think that this is actually going to happen from this event, that we could actually see the Insurrection Act be initiated from this type of event. And that the left, the liberal left, the Democrats, the globalists, the international global cartel, they have something up their sleeve. They are planning something. What I would probably consider the firestorm type of event. This is one of, if not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that came into our country that are dangerous enemies to the United States of America that are sitting in our cities. So this is very, very serious matter. It's a lot of what General Flynn talked about in our interview today. I think that there was probably intelligence that something like this was going to happen, most likely because of the seditious six video that came out, and they know that the seditious six video was not coordinated by those senators and congressmen, that someone else coordinated, someone else paid for it. We're hearing rumors that came directly from the Central Intelligence Agency through the U.S. intelligence network, which if so, this means that there's a divergence within the Trump administration, that there are rogue actors at play directly in our government. General Flynn talks about this as well. And it's way more dire than we ever could have imagined. And what we're talking about is not a few infiltrators, not hundreds of infiltrators, not thousands of infiltrators, but potentially even tens of thousands of infiltrators inside of our government that are working for the deep state. And so we are coming into that crunch time right now where it's, I would say it's shit or get off the pot. It's President Trump. I love the man, but it is time to make some very, very hard decisions. It is time to most likely get rid of Susie Wiles, to fire John Ratcliffe. It is time to bring people like General Michael Flynn in as your national security advisor, because that is one person who knows exactly what's happening, how it's happening, why it's happening, and what to do to defend it and counteract it. And so it's been a very interesting day. I know this is the day before Thanksgiving, but this is the perfect time that these people will actually strike. They don't give a shit about your feelings. They don't give a shit about and it looks like he's on right now.
All right, let me bring it up on the screen.
Which has achieved an unprecedented reduction in violent crime and crimes of all type. This heinous assault was an act of evil, an act of hatred, and an act of terror. It was a crime against our entire nation. It was a crime against humanity. The hearts of all Americans tonight are with those two members of the West Virginia National Guard and their families. The love of our entire country is pouring out for them, and we are lifting them up in our prayers. As we are filled with anguish and grief for those who were shot, we're also filled with righteous anger and ferocious resolve. As President of the United States, I am determined to ensure that the animal who perpetrated this atrocity pays the steepest possible price. I can report tonight that based on the best available information, the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan, a hellhole on earth. He was flown in by the Biden administration in September 2021 on those infamous flights that everybody was talking about. Nobody knew who was coming in. Nobody knew anything about it. His status was extended under legislation signed by President Biden, a disastrous president, the worst in the history of our country. This attack underscores the single greatest national security threat facing our nation. The last administration let in 20 million unknown and unvetted foreigners from all over the world, from places that you don't want to even know about. No country can tolerate such a risk to our very survival. An example is Minnesota, where hundreds of thousands of Somalians are ripping off our country and ripping apart that once great state. Billions of dollars are lost, and gangs of Somalians come from a country that doesn't even have a government, no laws, no water, no military, no nothing. As their representatives in our country preach to us about our Constitution and how our country is no good. We're not going to put up with these kind of assaults on law and order by people who shouldn't even be in our country. We must now re-examine every single alien who has entered our country from Afghanistan under Biden, and we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here or add benefit to our country. If they can't love our country, we don't want them. America will never bend and never yield in the face of terror. And at the same time, we will not be deterred from the mission these service members were so nobly fulfilling. That is why tonight I can announce that I have directed the Department of War to mobilize an additional 500 troops to help protect our capital city. We will make America totally safe again, and we will bring the perpetrator of this barbaric attack to swift and certain justice if the bullets going in the opposite direction haven't already done that. During this time of the year, when we gather at home with loved ones, these two patriots were wearing the uniform of our country, patrolling the streets of our capital. They had taken a selfless oath to defend our nation against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that is exactly what they were doing when they were gunned down in a savage attack. I want to express my extraordinary gratitude to every member of the United States military who is deployed tonight at home and abroad. I also want to thank the Secret Service and the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department for their work today. This Thanksgiving, I ask every family to say a prayer for the two great heroes who were so horribly shot, and for their loved ones. Please say a prayer. May God bless them and comfort them, and may God bless and protect the United States of America. Thank you and good night.
Oh, there you have it. Give me 1 second while I just pull these things and get them back in order. Did he say 1,000 troops? Is that the number I heard?
I know they're going to deploy 500 more now to DC. I respect the president coming out and saying that, although I think that he probably should have came out and done more. He probably should have gave some resolve, told more information, said more information about what's happening right now, and said that the deep state is fighting back and called this as it is. You know, he said that this gentleman came in on a plane under in September 2001 under the Biden flights out of Afghanistan after the debacle there. Same flights that we knew, we had no idea who was on there. It was never the interpreters that were on there, which means that the DOD has a record of this person coming into our country, and they granted him a visa without ever vetting this person whatsoever. Well, why? Well, what is a better way to get terrorists on and into the United States of America than on that plane during that great debacle in Afghanistan? And this is exactly what we're seeing.
We always looked at it as a mobilization.
Yep.
And when you've seen, especially in the recent months with the FBI and the DOJ finding people from specific units, here's the thing. If you got guys from specific units, why would they be coming to America unless they were part of some type of operation that they wanted to facilitate? That there's no, risk benefit otherwise for them to come over here. So, it's definitely there. He put out the number as, 20 million unknown foreigners, for those that have seen some of the interviews that we've done with former Border Patrol officer JJ Carroll. We've heard numbers as high as, up to 30 million.
Mhm.
Regardless, that's a lot. If you go back, and we're talking about this on a show that me and Josh did earlier, with Jaco, it was either late 2022 or early 2023 when you had the Police Officers and Sheriffs Association had their meeting, their national meeting, and then information gets leaked from that there was about 2 million tier 1 threats that were identified. And then shortly after that, we get confirmation of that. Well, that was, what, almost 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago. So that number is probably significantly increased. But I would say it's a safe assessment to also understand that Trump recognizes this. I think there's a reason, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. We have the largest presence of the U.S. military at our southern border, even after Trump shut it down, to 98, 99%. And after he had already, there was no more human trafficking and human smuggling coming across the southern border. There was no more narcotics trafficking. However, he was still adding troops and adding troops. So that was a strong indicator that they knew that there was still more going on. What you guys are going to hear in this conversation that we had with the general that we're going to be playing here shortly is, the Muslim Brotherhood, and this is a real threat. There are people on social media and different platforms that want to isolate everybody to just looking at one particular faction of people that have infiltrated our government. They only want to point towards one trending topic. But the reality is our country is being attacked on all flanks, at the political level, at the economic level, the infiltration. And you're going to hear some shocking numbers here in the next hour, folks, when it comes to infiltration. Yeah. And I thought I had a pretty good grasp on the size of that. And, the general, put out some numbers that was really concerning to me, especially, we have the conversation last night that we did on DEF CON. And while we have such a large audience watching right now, if you're not familiar with the shows that me and Josh do, Tuesday nights, 10:30 p.m. Eastern on Badlands, we do a show called DEF CON 0. I would definitely invite you guys to go see that. As we move into getting this interview set up, quite interesting, the time that President Trump chose to do that. Maybe because he was anticipating us going at 9:30 Eastern when we normally do. Maybe he was timing it for us. I agree with you.
Well, they did it at 9:15, and I think that this is interesting, Alpha. 2115, September 7th, 2018. Specific timing rests with POTUS. Hints, expend ammunition. Think New York Times Anon article. Example, the world is watching. If you know what this New York Times Anon article is, this actually goes back to another Q post just 2 before this from the same date and time. And you're going to love this because context matters. Do you believe in coincidences? New York Times Anon source.
Sleeper cells. That's a word you're going to hear in the next hour.
Well, that's exactly what this was. The whole world is watching. Hence, expend ammunition. It's on. It's happening. They are fighting back. They are playing their playbook. The question is do we have everything prepared? I believe that Trump is got things organized to where they need to be. We're well prepared for what's about to happen. I think that the next move that he needs to do is bring General Michael Flynn as National Security Advisor. He needs to do that stat. I mean, he needs to do that. He needs to call General Flynn right now and be like, you ready to serve again? I think that needs to happen. Just because after this interview, listening to General Michael Flynn, he understands what's happening. He knows the insides and outs. This is an intelligence operation, a covert operation you are watching be perpetuated by the intelligence agencies, by rogue actors within our government, by foreign nations and intelligence agencies. Like so guys, the Laura Logan interview the other day with Gary and Ralph that disclosed how the elections are rigged. This was so critically important, and I wish it was getting more attention. This exposed their network of how they control 72 countries around the world, of how they control the politicians, of how they control the power. And it was just exposed, which means that there's going to be people moving to reverse what they were doing, which means that their power base, their power structure is now under attack. And this is why we are seeing this occur right now. And this is what we've been warning about. This is what we've been talking about on DEF CON, Q After Hours, the Daily Dose, and Alpha Warrior Show. So it's buckle up, Buttercup. Things are about to get bumpy.
For those that joined a little late, just to bring you guys up to speed on what's going on, we're going to be playing the interview. I would say the conversation that we had with General Flynn earlier today. So this interview is from today. It's just short of an hour. Following that interview, me and Josh will be rejoining you guys live, and we're going to debrief this conversation. We're going to talk about the things that we talked about with the general, and I think that'll provide a lot of insight for you guys, especially as we get to watch it again with you guys. The other thing that I'll say, just to rubber stamp, I absolutely agree with you that President Trump needs to give the general a phone call, but not only because of what you said, he understands what's going on. One of the things you guys are going to recognize in this conversation is he has a solution for this problem.
Right.
And that's what's really important. We need people with solutions. So with that, folks, as a matter of fact, let's pay some bills real quick. I'll do a Rumble ad, and then you want to do a Rumble ad?
Yeah, I think we can do that.
All right, so let me go here, bring this up on the screen for you guys. And here we go. All right, let's be clear. Cryptocurrency is no longer emerging. It's here. And this latest move cements the reality in the biggest way yet. Trump Media Group just inked a massive $6.4 billion deal with Crypto.com, the world's top crypto platform. They're teaming up to scoop up $6.4 billion in CRO, the powerhouse token that fuels fast, low-fee DeFi, staking rewards, and real-world perks like cashback on your spends to launch America's first CRO treasury. When it's done, this new company will be the biggest CRO holder out there. Want in on the action? Head to Crypto.com today and grab some CRO. Let's make crypto great again. And for my audience that's watching on Rumble, you will see that populate in the live chat. You'll see it down in the description. And for those of you watching on the alpha platforms, if you want to give that a try, you got to jump on over to Rumble. And with that, I give the floor to Josh, and I will get this interview ready to go.
All right. Okay, I'll bring this up. And new research says over 80% of Americans and 3/4 of Trump voters support America First international assistance, according to a new poll by McLaughlin. One of President Trump's pollsters, Americans across the country support assistance designed to root out fraud, tamp down terrorism, secure our borders, support small farmers, and feed starving children. And over 70% of Trump voters believe that President Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize if he creates a world where almost no child starves to death. This is the type of assistance we can get behind. Many people will try to stop him, but only President Trump can turn America First international assistance into a reality. If he does it, a Nobel Prize is in his future. And for all of my audience or anybody out there, go on over to my Rumble and you will see the QR code and the links for that ad right there. And appreciate Rumble and appreciate Coffee and Crypto.com.
That, folks, enjoy this conversation, and we'll be back here with you live in about 55 minutes. Man, we told you we had a special surprise interview today, and as you can see on the screen, that surprise is what everybody, I would say, probably expected, if not at least was hoping for. General, thank you for joining us. We're at a very critical time right now. You just came off the heels of an interview on InfoWars with AJ, and you made some pretty strong demands on there, and you're speaking what a lot of Americans in our audience feel with us. So let's just start from that first conversation on the seditious six that came out and made these statements. You know, everyone here is a veteran, and we understand how critical and how dangerous that was. Give us your thoughts on what you witnessed.
Yeah, well, that's an element. The seditious six, that crowd there, that's an element of an ongoing color revolution that the United States of America is involved in and has been since 2016, okay, not prior to to get rid of Trump before he even got elected. And then, now this is just another one of the tactics, and it's clear that that group conspired with the same messaging. They got the whole thing like perfectly packaged together. And that's another one of these, what I call this type of unrestricted warfare that we are involved in, which means, it is boundless what you can do in unrestricted warfare. You don't care what you do. I mean, as long as you're winning, right? And I feel that there are days when I feel like, like when Trump won in the last election. And then there's other times when you feel like, oh, okay, He's done this. He's done that. But then there's days when I'm like, oh, I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know if he's got the right people around him. I don't know if he's got, if he's making the right, the right decisions. So let's go back a little bit. Right? Let's take it, for the audience who have lived through all of this, and I've been living through it. I sometimes wonder, why do I continue doing this shit? But, and part of it is because, I got kids and I got grandkids primarily, so I'm like, and I'm just one of those type, I'm not designed to quit. I'm just not designed to give up. So, wasn't raised like that by a tough father who raised me right, I believe. Anyway, let's go back. So let's go back to Russiagate, right? Crossfire Hurricane. You're speaking to Crossfire Razor right now. That's who I was, identified in Crossfire Hurricane. So Russiagate. And then you have Spygate, right? We just recently saw another thing about spying on the leak of the Witkoff peace plan, right? The peace plan so we just saw that was leaked. Is that leaked by NSA? I mean, I think it was 57 people in the United States government that apparently were given access to my name and then probably leaked it. And it definitely, we know for a fact that it got leaked to the Washington Post, which is a massive, massive crime against not just Mike Flynn, but against General Mike Flynn, against a former intelligence agency head. And at that time, I was the designated national security advisor to the country. So, I mean, that was a pretty bad thing. So that's Spygate. And then you go into Impeachment Gate. And then you go in between the two presidencies of Donald Trump, where you had the mass, after the stolen election of 2020, which was stolen. And believe me, folks, this is going to come out. It's going to come out in spades. I think people that are following Emerald Robinson right now, maybe, they can go peek at that. I think Emerald gets a little emotional sometimes on going after attacking people instead of attacking the issues and attacking the specific facts that she has presented, that I think some of them are, from what I can tell, they look pretty straightforward. So you have the stolen election of 2020. Then you have all the indictments that they went after Donald Trump for. And then one of them ended up in a conviction. The poor bastard's he's convicted with 32 felony counts, 700 years. That judge is going to bring him back into court in 2029 when he comes out of the presidency. If the Republican Party doesn't win the governorship of New York, Trump's in trouble. President Trump, hey, you're in trouble, buddy. If you don't figure this thing out with the GOP, we screwed up the New York City race here recently. And then so now, I'm jumping here a little bit, but you go through all of the convictions of Donald Trump, all of the lawfare that we faced after the 2020 stolen, rigged election. And now we're into, we're back into 2024. And so the question, and I got this question the other day, well, how did Trump win if the elections are rigged? Well, I'll tell you what, there were some steps that were taken. There were some things that were done. Those things will come out. They will come out. And it does have to do with overseas. It has to do with the way that mail-in ballots were handled. It has to do with, what Trump did. One of the things he did do was, the too big to rig, get people in early voting. It does have to do with people like Bobby Kennedy, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard coming over from the dark side, right? And Elon Musk purchasing Twitter and turning it into X and giving us a platform. None of us, you guys probably got booted off of YouTube. Everybody. In fact, if I was going to come on your show and you told me, well, our platform is YouTube, I would say, forget it, guys, because as soon as I open my mouth, they go, bling, yep. they will bleep you up. So then we come into a duly elected President Donald J. Trump again. And now what have we seen? We've seen lawfare in such a fashion. We've seen the judiciary go after every single executive order. So all they're doing is they're delaying so they can get to the next election, right? Which is we're one election away from losing this country. Everything. I mean, there's all kinds of activities that are going on here. We've seen the leaks. We've seen the things that have happened inside of the government. We've seen the lawfare. What just recently happened with Comey and Letitia James. I mean, the judge just threw out what was probably one of the greatest crimes in this country, which is what Comey was being indicted for. The judge threw it out for technical reasons. And that we now know that was avoidable, Pam Bondi. That was avoidable. You know, it was easy to do. In fact, when they go to appeal, but see, this is not because Bondi screwed up, which she probably did, but this is because we are facing a revolution. We are facing an internal subversion of the United States of America, and it's being done by people in the Department of Justice still. It's being done by people in the United States intelligence community. It's being done by people in the Department of Defense. I mean, how many members of the military, you know, after Charlie Kirk was killed, you know, were they were raging about it. They were, you know, raving about it, right? Online, in uniform, all this craziness. And there's also some stuff that I sent to people, very senior people in the military. This morning, I sent a couple of posts that I saw online where, you know, a young person in uniform is actually talking about subversion. And I'm like, this shit has got to end. And that's exactly how I said it to the person that I sent it to. And that's a pretty senior person inside of our Department of Defense. So everything that I just laid out in the last, 5-minute diatribe or whatever time frame, all of that are facts. Those are facts. Those are things that have happened. So now what are we going to do about it? What is it that is going on? And what is going on is we are continuing down this path where we are in the midst of what we call a color revolution, because that's what it is. And I've written papers about this and posted them online. People can go file, I've written one of the things, I wrote a damn book about it, the 5th generation warfare. I'm in the process of putting together a counter. So I'm writing another manual, and actually Boone Cutler was helping me do it. And so I've taken it and I'm going to publish it. I hope we can publish it sooner than later. It's a counter to the Chinese manual on unrestricted warfare. So it's essentially countering unrestricted warfare. And it's a way and a method and a doctrine. As you guys know, if you served in the military, doctrine, tactics, techniques, and procedures. That's essentially what it is to try to counter this. So starting from the very top, and the very top for us would be President Donald J. Trump. So what do I recommend? So what, right? Everything that I've spewed here. So what's the answer? Well, I think part of the answer is in this period of Thanksgiving that we are going into, today and going into tomorrow, the only country on the planet that celebrates it, because of, Thanksgiving is not about, giving thanks because you're about to stuff yourself. It's about giving thanks to those who sacrificed to even create this. In fact, it was George Washington. It was George Washington who created Thanksgiving, because he addressed his men at the time. That's where we get Thanksgiving. People need to understand that part of who we are, because it has to do with sacrifice. So as we go into this period of Thanksgiving, President Trump needs to do an address to the nation. And I believe this. I mean, I don't want to see another, press conference from the Resolute desk or from, a cabinet meeting where people are throwing questions at him and screaming from the media, the screaming memes on the media. That's fine. And we get our sound bites. People get their clips and all that kind of stuff. No, I want the president to sit, and I want him to tell the American people tonight or tomorrow night, or, I'm going to do an address to the nation. Maybe it's Monday night, not a State of the Union to a Congress that hates him, right? I mean, we have Republican senators that are fighting back against these members of Congress, right? Republican senators, not the left-leaning senator, the Thune and Johnson. They want nothing more than Trump to just go away. That's what they really want. So Trump needs to address the nation, not Congress, the nation, the people of the United States of America. When he does that, trust me, it'll be the most watched address to the nation in the history of the world, because every freedom-loving nation around the world, every adversarial leader that we face right now are all going to tune in, because they're going to want to know, what the hell is he going to talk about? And the things that he needs to talk about, he needs to talk about the recognition of this battle, this war that is being waged, that we are waging right now, that he is waging on our behalf. And he needs to talk about what is he doing to wage war against this conspiracy of people that have come together to take this country down. He needs to lay that out. He needs to let us know that he doesn't need to give us all the evidence. Some of it, and it's not because it's classified, it's because there's just an abundance. There's just so much of it. Just tell us that you recognize, Mr. President, the following couple of things. So we all go, man, because instead of sitting there online or sitting here, us guys talking to your large audience and saying, man, doesn't the president know this? Yeah, I believe I'm sitting here to tell you that I think the president knows all of this, and he knows all of it and more. And so what he needs to do, though, is he needs to tell the American people, because there's too many people that are asking this question, what's going on? What's he doing? Is he, does he know? Does he get it? He needs to tell the people, yes, America, yes, world, I get it. I understand what's happening, and here's what I'm going to do about it. But then one of the more important things that he needs to say is, he needs to say, what can you do about it? What can we, the American people, do? Because you guys know this. I think the last time I spoke with you guys, you asked me this question. And I get this question all the time from everybody that I speak to. And I speak to a lot of people. I bump into people. I love people. I love to engage. They always ask me, what can I do? What can I do? And I go through my local action equals a national impact drill, because I do believe in that. I do believe it is time for every citizen to serve this country, because I think all of us have a duty and a responsibility to serve, not just in uniform. Not everybody has it in their DNA to join the Army or the Marine Corps or whatever. But every citizen has a responsibility to serve. So that's what President Trump needs to tell us. He needs to tell us, here's what I believe every single American needs to do. Pay attention, right? Pray. Get out there and pray. But get off your knees when it's time. Get involved. Engage. He needs to talk a little bit about this last election. Okay, this last election was a bellwether of elections in our country. It's not just that Mamdani won the election of New York City, which is a $140 billion budget and has about, 15 million people in the metropolitan. It's bigger than like 10 states combined, right, guys? Yep. I mean, these people are going to be running this guy for president of the United States in another couple of, in one more iteration.
They're going to try.
Mark my words. But it's not just about Zoran and winning New York City. It's about the elections that just occurred in our country a couple of weeks ago, because there's like 40, I think it was down to municipalities and school boards. There was like 40 Muslims that won. So, okay, well, so what's going on? Now, now I'm an Islamophobe, I'm anti whatever. I'm not. If that's what people want, but people need to understand that way of life, the Sharia, justice system, is incompatible with our constitutional republic, with our rule of law. I mean, it just is. I don't want Catholic priests who are pedophiles to be dealt with via canon law. Okay. And I've written about that. I know a lot about that. What I want everybody to work within the system that we have, to assimilate and be patriots. I don't care if you go out and hug trees and you want to paint your hair purple with pink polka dots. I don't give a shit. What I care about is that you love this country and that you want to thrive in this country and you want America to thrive. That's what I care about. How you behave and all that, as long as you're an adult. Because one of the other data points that I forgot to mention was the Epstein affair. That ain't going away either. So these are all the things that are factually happening. I think that the president needs to recognize and understand that they are. He needs to tell the American people that in a big statement. And he needs to say, here's what I'm doing about it. Here's the actions that I've directed. And then here's what you can do. Here's what I need the American people to do. And then he needs to finish by just saying, I am not going to relent. I'm going to continue to stay on top of this. I will come back periodically and give you, the American people, updates on how we're doing, on what it is that we're doing. Maybe he does that through another address, or maybe he does that through periodic daily press briefings, or maybe he does it through a State of the Union. But the American people right now are upset. I can feel it. I mean, I know it. I see it. And we're not living in a bubble here, guys. You know, I'm one of these guys that I read a lot. I mean, I read overseas network stuff. I watch overseas network stuff. I read a lot of media from overseas all over the world. I read a lot of media right here in our country. I watch the internet quite a bit. I'm on about 8 or 9 platforms myself. I have a lot of followers. I try to listen. I try to learn. All the haters, you know, they hate, but they have a message, and it's an interesting one because I pay attention to it. You know, they're going to hate no matter what. But, you know, as Elon just said recently, how many of them are bots out there? All of the craziness that we're dealing with, these are all components of unrestricted warfare. And this is the playbook of the left. It is the playbook that people like Podesta put out. I mean, they're following a plan, and they are trying to destroy, President Trump again, because he was able to masterfully and shrewdly navigate, and with the help of, of some real patriotic efforts over the last 4 years, win. And he can tout, he can say, yeah, the American people love me. Yeah, not all of them, Donald. I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of people. It's not about being loved either. It's about being respected, and it's about being a leader. And we don't believe that you're going to know everything. We don't believe that you need to know everything. But what we do believe you need to demonstrate leadership all the time. That's what we want our leaders to do. You guys know that. I mean, I led a lot of organizations in the military. I didn't know how to I can't change a spark plug in a Jeep, right? I mean, it's like shit like that. But I know other aspects of what I do know, and I know how to get shit done. And I think that that's what we need right now. We need to know that there are specialists who are going to be the spearfishers, and then there's the guy that's going to throw the net over everything and catch it all, right? And so what I want right now is I want President Donald J. Trump to succeed. I want him to succeed, and I want him to succeed in a big, big way, because if he doesn't, then we're all screwed. Then all of this independent media stuff, all the things that we've been fighting for, which is really, you're not only fighting for your families, guys, you're fighting, for your audience share and all that kind of stuff from a business perspective. I got all that. We all have to do that. But you're also fighting for freedom. I mean, that's really, at the end of the day, that's kind of who we are and what we're doing. We're all out here in our own little ways fighting for freedom. Whether we're sitting behind the Resolute desk or sitting behind, a desk here in Southern Florida somewhere, right? I mean, we are fighting for freedom, our community's freedom, our country's freedom, our family's freedom. So we have some kind of a future that we can go into. But, but as I say that out of one side of my mouth, the other side of my mouth says, look, we all know that something is amiss. And what is amiss? And it's no longer like, well, is this a maybe? Is this politics as usual? No. This is irregular warfare. It's unrestricted warfare. It's hybrid warfare. It's a combination of all the above. And we better see it for what it is. And now we have to do the right things. And I think this is where, like I said earlier, where it starts at the top. And I know I'm going on and on here, but President Donald J. Trump he's the only person in our country that takes the oath of office, and in that oath of office uses one word that's different than any oath that you guys ever took, any oath that I ever took, and that word is preserve. And he has the responsibility to preserve the Constitution of the United States of America. That's in the oath of office for the President of the United States. Not even the Vice President takes that oath. Not only the President. And that's why I say we might have 3 equal branches of government, but we only have one president. And I think right now is the time for President Trump to act. If he doesn't act now, I'm concerned that we won't get the momentum that we need to be able to get this country back on track.
Real quick, General, and I absolutely agree, and I'm sure Josh agrees with me too. Momentum is extremely important. Morale is a weapon. I think that's important. What's a marker or an action that president can take right now to show he understands exactly what you're saying, and that it will convey to the people that I'm not just talking, but this is showing how serious I am. And I know you had mentioned, having Brennan being brought in and put under the spotlight.
I think he needs to. I think John Brennan needs to be brought in. I think John Brennan needs to be brought in immediately, arrested, questioned under oath, under the lights, so to speak. I just think he needs that. I think it needs to happen. And Trump can do that for national security purposes. And I think that what we, and wherever Brennan's at around the world today, but to me, I have a bad feeling that this guy is sort of he's not the leader of it, but he's certainly he's sort of on the battlefield. If you look at what we're facing as a battlefield, he's kind of their sort of operator on the battlefield, leading some of their troops. So I think that and this is inside the government and outside the government for sure, people that recently served in our government, and certainly in the last administration, if not both the Obama and the Biden administrations. And
so he's commanding the stay behinds.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good way to say it, Josh. And so I think that he needs to do that. He needs to do that. And instead of allowing, Brennan to continue to have his shit-eating grin, on MSNBC all the time. And I think we're going to start to see even some of the left-leaning media who start to get this sense that, well, Trump actually might start acting like that. And it's not acting like out of school. This is actually doing things that he is supposed to do. He's supposed to be leading this country. He's the president of the United States. He's the commander in chief, and he's the chief law enforcement officer for the nation, period. So he needs to, that's a step, that's a tactical step, though. The strategic step is addressing the nation and telling the nation this is what we need to do. The tactical step, which could lead to big, big strategic consequences, would be going and getting Brennan and bring him in and have him questioned under oath, and if and see what Brennan has to say. And look, and what the president can do is he can go and look at the last. This guy, he should not be holding a clearance. I don't know if he still is. I think Trump took it from him, but this guy's out and about doing all kinds of nefarious things. All you got to do is go look at his communications patterns for the last, 60, 90 days, maybe for the last 6 months. Maybe go back as far as when Trump came into office, right? I mean, there is something not right, and it needs to be dealt with. If John Brennan has nothing to hide, then John, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But you see him lately on some of these little clips that we have seen about Brennan. You can see him, he gets squirming in his seat and he starts to get all upset and bent out of shape about getting asked a tough question because he knows his days are numbered, but they're only numbered if the president of the United States, in this case, President Donald J. Trump, makes a decision about him. I know there's been some subpoenas out, but it's kind of like, this is where again, I love Trump, big champion for him. I'm on Team Trump and Team America, but I disagree with him on many things in some cases. But when he talks about, the Department of Justice has got this, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I've directed them to do, I've told them to do some things. No, you're the chief law enforcement officer for this country. What is it that you're going to do? You can direct things too, Mr. President. You don't have to wait for the court system to do what they just did with Letitia James and James Comey. They dismissed the case on technical grounds. And that judge knows, in particularly Comey, he was part of a conspiracy to take over, to undermine the country. Letitia James, dead to rights, she's going to go to jail because of what she did with all the basically the money fraud, the fraud that she did with her the various real estate dealings that she had. I mean, it's insane. The judge put out on technical things.
But isn't it kind of revealing from the DOJ's perspective that the only thing that they're indicting Comey on is perjury, to lying to Congress, when we know that his crimes are far greater? Even with the subpoenas that are going out for John Brennan. I know this is coming from Keonis in the Southern District of Florida, and this is a larger investigation, which seems to be kind of putting together a RICO investigation on a lot of these guys. But what I'm looking at right now is, yesterday you put out your digital soldiers video. You put out Get Ready. I'm right with you with this. I understand that the seditious six coming out the other day, this is scapegoat narrative. They're not saying that because they want soldiers to disobey lawful orders. They're saying that because they're expecting soldiers to obey orders that are given to them. And maybe they got a sleeper cell in there, a battalion commander or something that gives an order that's unlawful.
There's more than that, Josh. Yeah, I think I understand where you're going with this. There's more than that. I mean, I can tell you that probably inside, we're not looking at, some battalion commander that's a sleeper cell. We're looking at thousands of people inside of the government. I mean, it could be tens of thousands. In fact, I would venture to say we're probably talking about tens of thousands. I'm speculating a bit, but there are definitely thousands that are inside of the government in the general vicinity of the swamp that are civilian and military. I mean, we see it with the military where they're cheering on the murder of Charlie Kirk. I mean, Jesus. So we're talking about thousands of people inside of our military and inside of the government writ large. I mean, look what we just learned about the CIA. Right. So what you're asking about really is, it gets back to kind of where are we with this stuff? Like, what is it that when I say get ready, we have a responsibility to put pressure on our government. Okay. Just because it's Donald J. Trump, we don't, sit back and go, I'm just going to wait and see what happens.
Well, that's a sentiment though of a lot of people out there. And that's the problem.
You're right. It still is a problem because people think that there's some 5D chess thing going on. There's not. If we're going to wait on the Department of Justice to do something, the Department of Justice what just happened in the Eastern District of Virginia with Comey and Letitia James, what just happened was totally avoidable. Okay. So this is where Trump's got to pull him in. There's a good clip that you guys might have seen, the clip of Stephen Miller talking to Jesse Waters. Yeah. I thought that Stephen was right. Stephen was very strong, and it's the first time that I've actually seen, he's as smart as they get, but it's the first time that I've actually seen Stephen Miller say things that he's never said before. When he talked about, essentially it's a conspiracy, but it's not just a conspiracy of those seditious six, right? That we're calling them. It's not just that. It is a much broader conspiracy. So if they only went after Comey for lying to Congress or lying to, for one perjury charge, then that means to me, there's some other problem that's going on inside of the Department of Justice. And again, if there is a true conspiracy, and I believe that there was, in fact, the Director of National Intelligence, this is not me, these are more facts. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, both used the word treason and the other word, Obama, in the same sentence. Okay. So you cannot say things like that and then just kind of let it go, right? You can't say things like Trump's put out the other day about, treason and hang him. I mean, George Washington would hang him. I know I don't have the exact quote from the post that he put out, but Mr. President, you can't say things like that and then not follow through with some type of action. Does that mean I want these people hung? No. But should these people now, is there going to be an investigation? Yes. But are we going to go through another investigation? Are we going to go through another of this and that? I mean, these people know who they are. That's why I talked about Brennan.
It's funny that when the Democrats or the DOJ from the Biden administration do an investigation on Donald Trump, it takes a matter of weeks to get an indictment. But when the Trump administration does an investigation, we're sitting here for months twiddling our fingers. Yeah. And, we got to look at that. There are obviously bad actors or people in high positions that are interfering with this. I mean, you go back to Pam Bondi in March of 2025 talking about, I have the Epstein files on my desk. I just watched this horrific video. and it's implicating of high powerful people. And then what do you get? Oh, there's no Epstein files. There's nothing here. And what they're doing is they're covering up the system that empowered Epstein primarily. And I think that's the bigger cover up, is that they're preserving the system of the swamp.
That, well, I can tell you, Epstein affair, and it was really disheartening when Trump came out initially and talked about it being a Dem hoax, right? A Democrat hoax. The Epstein affair ain't going away, and I'm going to tell you, it's not going away. Now they may take guys like me out, but I'm just telling you, it's not going away, because the elite social class that does, disgusting things to young children cannot get away with it. I mean, some pedophile down the street here that gets caught, he's going to go to prison, and he should. As far as I'm concerned, they ought to get the death penalty. Every state in the union ought to have the death penalty for pedophiles. You know why? Because when we did an interview with a group of pedophiles that were in prison, you know what they told us? What scared them the most? The death penalty. Okay, so there's a little factual piece of data point. But these people that are sitting in jail, rightly so, that got caught in some pedophile ring here, and in the corner of Pete and repeat here, these people that have been doing this, and if it was a spy operation to leverage Mossad or whoever it was, right? All this stuff, but they leveraged children to compromise these sick bastards. That's why I'm saying Trump should have made it about the children. He made it about a Dem hoax. Now, he's kind of gotten over that transom, and we're starting to see more about it. I mean, but it's still, release it all, and let's go after these people. Let's expose them. Why? Because trust me, the truth always comes out. It always comes out. And there's so many people in the world of independent media, independent journalists. That's why I reposted that thing about digital soldiers. The digital soldiers are digging, man. They are improving their foxholes. They're digging trench lines. They're moving towards the sound of the guns. They're moving towards the enemy. They're researching. They're analyzing. They're sharing. They're putting stuff out, and more things are being exposed. And the more that gets exposed, the more the American people are going to say, Jesus. I mean, number one, what are we doing about it? Hopefully, we have a good leader in the White House, and we do right now. Thank God. We don't have good leaders in Congress. We do not.
Agreed.
They are going to protect their own asses, and so this is why Trump needs to stop. He needs to say, look, what do I want? And like I said in a post a couple of days ago, I'll start chiseling, Mount Rushmore, but he's got to do these things and not worry about the political ramifications. He's not running for president again, even though, I jokingly say maybe he does, right? But I mean, I don't want to get us off track here. I mean, the seriousness of what we're facing is very, very real. Trump has one shot to save this country, one more shot. And God gave him that shot because he didn't get killed on that day in Pennsylvania, nor the additional assassination attempt where I guess the guy at the golf course, right? And look at the things that we're learning about the assassins. I mean, God, look at the whole Charlie Kirk thing.
It's MK Ultra 2.0.
It's just mind numbing at a certain point in time. And so what I'm concerned about is maybe this seditious six, maybe they were telegraphing a potential false flag that might be coming, right?
Yep.
I don't know. I don't want to, get all people crazy about, about what's going on or what might or might not, what might not be. What I will tell you is that we have enemies, and we have enemies inside the wire. Okay. Guaranteed we have enemies inside the wire. Some of them are at the strategic level. Many are on the streets of America, and there are sleeper cells out there. There are things and elements that are out there that are under pressure. And, maybe at a certain point in time, something does happen. I don't know. I don't know. And I don't care. I don't want to be right about it. I just know that things go in cycles. History does repeat itself, and it is one of the best teachers. And we are entering a phase where we are so focused on overseas craziness, the war in Ukraine, the Middle East, we got Venezuela right now. The one aircraft carrier that's down there, one aircraft carrier costs $20 million a day to operate. 20. Now, I don't mind that. If there is a goal and an end state that we're going to have, even that, Mr. President, right? What are the clear objectives? Because we never knew what our objectives were for Afghanistan. We never knew what our objectives were for Iraq. I frankly don't know what our objectives are for Eastern Europe, for Ukraine. I don't. And I'm telling you, I'm a guy that pays very close attention. I don't know other than listening to what Trump has said about that issue, where he says we got to stop the killing. And he also said the same for the Middle East, in Gaza. We got to stop the killing. That's a noble objective. But what we need is clear objectives for what matters to the United States of America and to the people of America, to be able to say, okay, I'm a citizen, I'm an informed citizen, but I'm a citizen nonetheless. And now I can get behind that because I understand it. It's clear. There's a timeline to it. We can see what the end is supposed to look like. Now let's go and get it, right? Let's knock it out there, Mr. President. The American people are with you. You do whatever you need to do to achieve that. You use whatever resources you need to do to achieve that, because these people are not going to stop. When I say these people, the left, okay, and it's not some small little group of people. There are a lot of people inside of our government. We just talked about that a few seconds ago. I mean, this is real. It's real. We have not been here before. It didn't really begin in earnest and at speed until, of course, Trump won in 2016. Okay, because the plan was 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary. And, Alpha, you, Josh, me, and many others we wouldn't be talking. We wouldn't be talking. All this shit would be shut down.
Yeah, it's a 6-year plan. Now, when I look at everything that's happened, the Biden administration, I listened to Ralph and Gary's interview with Lara Logan. It was absolutely incredible.
Yep.
What was said on that. Emerald have been following that. We've been following it ourselves and digging and putting this out there. We had Patrick Byrne on last year right after the election. He laid out what you and him and what you guys were doing during this time. So obviously, I feel we all owe you a debt of gratitude for that. But on top of that is that the left has been planning. They have been putting things in the motion. They have a plan. And I want people to understand this. They have a plan. They didn't just arbitrarily bring 23 million illegal immigrants into our country, including Trinidad, cartels, Hezbollah, Hamas. They didn't allow them to flow through to not use them. And so we have that. We have the seditious six. We have them knowing that they're going by their playbook. So what is our playbook? And right now, I think what we need most is we need a unified voice. And there's a lot of psychological warfare operations going on social media to divide Republicans, to divide MAGA, to divide America First, and to bring us apart so that we don't have that unified voice. And that unified voice needs to go out there and demand strictly to Congress, to Senate, to Donald Trump, that, hey, this is what we want, and we want this now. The funny thing is we can sit out there and we can cancel Dick's Sporting Good. We can cancel Budweiser. But can we get the president to go out there and bring about arrest? Can we get Pam Bondi to do her fucking job? Can we get Congress to do their job?
Yeah. I'm just going to read you this quickly because it's part of the definition. And I've talked about this at the beginning. Unrestricted warfare is war without bounds. Unrestricted warfare is war without bounds. That means anything goes. And so when we are up against an enemy with a plan that uses unrestricted warfare, meaning warfare without bounds, they will do anything that they can, and they will not quit. They are not going to roll over. And this is why accountability does matter. And I lose my mind over this sometimes. And they talk about the hate mail I get. Oh, this is all, you want to. Yeah, I want accountability. I want to see people held accountable at the most senior levels of our former leaders in our government, right? Because if nobody is held accountable, then they'll keep doing the same thing. And when we have a GOP, okay, now I've been harping on the left here. Now I'll talk a little bit about our side, right? Like the lack of our plan, right? Because we have people in the establishment that so desperately want Trump to go away. And they do. They can't wait. The Bush family and some of these other establishment types, Paul Ryan off of Fox News, Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, they're all going to start coalescing together here in the next probably 6 months. You're hearing more from these guys now, but you're going to hear more where they're going to be like, we've got to move past Donald Trump. We've got to move past MAGA. There's so much operational activity right now to divide what MAGA is, right? And what MAGA is really, I mean, it's a bumper sticker. It's a great bumper sticker. But what it really is people who are American patriots. It's not ultra right-wing conservative. No, it's people who love this country. And, that's why the bumper sticker MAGA and the ideology of America first blended together so nicely, because you have a lot of people in this country, guys like me, right? If you really understand Mike Flynn, you really know Mike Flynn, then you'll understand where I'm coming from with this answer. I mean, and I said some of it during our discussion today. What I want what's best for America. I want what's best for America. I want to continue to adhere to our Constitution. I want to continue to adhere to our Bill of Rights, the rights that we've been, granted. And I want us to live in peace, right? I want us to demonstrate that we can fight for peace more than we fight to have wars and to sow wars around the world. I do think that there needs to be some radical reform in our government for sure. I mean, we can't have a rogue agency who's out there fomenting insurrection and regime change all over the world, or stealing elections for that matter in dozens and dozens of countries, right? We can't have that. So that's all I want. That's what America First is. It's not I'm going to be MAGA or you're going to be America First. But remember, for your audience, when you're on the internet, when you're in the world of social media, there's going to be a lot of that happening, and people are going to be trying to divide you. Are you in this camp? Are you in that camp? Are you in the Tucker camp? Are you in the whatever camp, right? I mean, no. Be in Camp America, right? Be on Team America. America First means, and making America great again is just a statement that we all want, right? I mean, if somebody says, no, I don't want to make America great again, then tuck and exit the door, right? I'm sorry. Bleep that out. Good. But tell them to get out, right? If they don't want to make America great again, that's a way. America First is an ideology. It is a way. It is an understanding of what do we have to do. It's like you guys, you're going to go spend time with family and maybe in the next 24 hours. You're going to go take care of the home front, right? That's what we all do. We take care of our homes. We take care of our houses. Let's take care of America first. There's nothing wrong with that. In order to do that, we've got to stop with, trying to be the world police. We've got to stop our own government from doing the things that they're doing to us. I just read today, I think, or last night, where I think we're still paying NGOs for stuff in Afghanistan. And that money's flowing back into people's pockets here. And this is Congress, right? This is Congress. So anyway, I went way past. I'm going to get in trouble here, but
let me ask you one quick question.
That one word, maybe.
I got you on that, General. Let me ask you one quick question. On the way out, and because you kind of touched on it, and we last night on one of our shows, we covered a Newsweek article from May 17th of 2021 talking about signature reduction and this 60,000 ghost army that's out there. And then in the first book that you and Boone did, and it's in section 311, it says they walk among us, and it lists not just terrorists but podcasters, religious leaders, social media influencers, and it's a whole list of people that's on there. And we see a lot of that, I call X the trenches of information warfare. And we see all that war being deployed here. And I'm constantly trying to warn my audience, look at people's historic pattern of their activity. And if there's a change of behavior that doesn't have an event to explain why they have that change of behavior, you need to question these people. How, in your, whether it's speculation or knowledge, how much do you see this in play right now on social media in places like X or Facebook or Instagram?
Yeah, good question. And so your audience knows, and again, anybody listens to this piece of it, there's also in the political realm, there are also people that will apply and register as let's just say as a Republican, run as a Republican, get financed as a Republican, win as a Republican. And then when they get into Congress, you look at their voting records and they vote like 30% of the time for the Constitution. 70% of the time they vote for some crazy ideas, right? Or that stat might even be worse. It might be like 10%, but they're a Republican. So there's an infiltration, and that's been going on for a long time. There is an infiltration into our school system, there, into the unions, into the school boards. So this unrestricted warfare that I talk about, without bounds, it is a effort to get into every single aspect. Now, specifically what you're talking about, do we have people that have suddenly risen out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you kind of go, where did they come from? Well, how did they become what they are, right? And this could be pastors, it could be podcasters, it could be people that you go and listen to. You go, oh, this guy's interesting. He's saying all the right things. But then you kind of go, then he starts to go, well, no, I'm not really, political. I don't really do political things, but and next thing you know, they're over here talking about some other thing, and you go, wait a second, I thought you were just talking about this. So we've got to be very shrewd or very smart about this. And here's two words that I have come to use in my vernacular, because you're right. Like, what event caused that change of behavior? Now, maybe it was a change for the positive, and they actually are true, and they're from the heart, right? But or they're not, and they're trying to get into something that I've seen it. I mean, I got all kinds of, I get attacked all the time by people who I'm like, God, you used to I thought you were a good guy, or a good group, right? Now you're like attacking me, and you're going, that I'm leading some pedophile group, somewhere. I mean, it's just weird, right? So I use two words that I think about all the time: judgment and discernment. Judgment and discernment. Judgment is like, I judge you, Alpha, to be a good guy. You're a sharp guy. You guys got a good show. So overall, good. Discernment is where I then look at you individually, right? Or I look at what your messages are and your messaging is, and I discern that, and I take that in, and I say, are these the type of people that I want to be part of? Is this a team that I want to be on? Is this a show that I want to go do? Is this somebody who I believe is very consistent in what it is that they're doing? Their pattern of behavior is something that hasn't really changed that much. These guys, what they say is what they mean, right? That kind of thing. That's discernment versus judgment, where we snap judge about somebody, like I've made that mistake, and I still do. But discernment is one that requires a little deeper understanding. And I think for everybody, we have to do that. We really have to do that. And I don't know if my words are going to matter, to be honest with you. And like I say, I hope that I'm wrong about some of these things, but you know what? I haven't been. I haven't. And I'm not uneducated about it. I am not ill-informed or misinformed. We'll sit here and I'll tell you that I have made mistakes in some things. I've done so. I've tried to, atone for those where I could. But the one thing that I have not done is I haven't put myself in a place where I have been inconsistent from the time I was a kid. Okay. People that know me, that deeply, deeply know me from the time I was a kid, what you see in Mike Flynn is what you get. And that's just the way it is. I have been blessed to have had a whole litany of experiences, not only in the military and in serving in our government, the highest levels of our government, but also going through an incredible level of persecution that I didn't deserve, but for some reason, it was what was meant to be. Because now I know this. I'm one of these voices out there, not in the wilderness anymore. I am right in your face, because I survived it, and I didn't fail. If I failed, it was for a brief moment for my family, but then I fought through it and recovered and got to a place where now a lot of people know, Jesus, this thing was based on a lie. This whole thing is based on a conspiracy to overthrow the country, and it's still going on. Remember, unrestricted warfare is warfare without bounds, and that's what we're in the middle of.
100%.
You know, sir, you said that you don't know if your words matter. I'm telling you, your words absolutely do matter. And that I don't think you ever stop being a general, and I don't think we ever stop being soldiers and sailors. And I think that that's one thing that we all have in common, and even our audiences have an understanding of and realize. Now, my thoughts on this are that, and I know you've said this on other shows, that you're better positioned on the outside because you can point where to go, more of a discreet advisor. But we need you in the White House. We need you next to Donald Trump, whether chief of staff or national security advisor, because it's that type of talk that you gave today. It's that general speaking. It's the reality of the situation that Donald Trump needs in his ear day in and day out, that's going to guide him to make the right decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Trump has to make that decision, right? And there are forces, trust me, there's forces around him, because this is like the what's the story of the king, emperor has no clothes, right? Emperor has no clothes. And who do you want to be? And I used to say this in staff meetings, and it had to do with awards, right? It had to do with awards. You get an award and it would go up the chain, and and you'd say, well, Jesus, this guy deserve, a freaking Medal of Honor, or does he deserve an achievement medal? I mean, so the point is who do you want to be the first asshole in the room, and because I think now it's time not to be unprofessional, but to be a little bit assholish, right? I mean, to be that general, to be that person who sits there and says, look, this is bullshit. This is what the American people are demanding. That's why I felt very good about when I heard Stephen Miller. I think Stephen Miller, I always, I think that he's probably one of the smartest guys there. When I heard him talk like that, I said, he finally gets it. He's finally saying the things that are not politics as usual, but this is a conspiracy to undermine this country. And these people are conspirators. This six are just a part of a much, much larger force. And like we've talked about, guys, we don't have a plan. We don't really have a plan. The plan is not the economic plan, the tariff plan, the plan for Venezuela. I mean, I'm talking about a plan to defeat this enemy that has decided, they have made a decision that now's the time to take the United States of America down a different ideological path.
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know General has to fly. I hope people realize that each one of us has our own accountability, just the way the government does. We have to be that plan. GeneralFlynn.com, ladies and gentlemen. You want more of his story? There's a book. Josh has read it. I've read it. There's an audio format of it. Go get the 5GW books, all that stuff. You said earlier, General, you don't want to just be loved. You want to be respected. And I want to let you know, from the people that we talk to, you're not just loved, you are respected. And Josh, if you want to tell the General your final words, and we'll cut him loose.
Yeah, I was going to just make a comment quick on what he was saying. He was saying, the president has the options. He has national security directives. He has war powers. He has the tools and the resources there. I just think he needs the proper guidance. And I think the proper guidance is someone inside the White House like General Flynn. And I think that we all need to be the advocate of that and start pushing that out there. And we need to go out there and let Donald Trump know that he needs General Flynn by his side, because that's the only way I think we're going to win this war, because the people that are surrounding him right now, it doesn't look like that's going to come about. And so, General Flynn, I love you, man. I respect you. I appreciate all your hard work. We owe you a debt of gratitude for what happened in 2024. And I'm pretty sure for much more things beyond that from 2016 on forth. You're a true patriot, man. And I salute you, sir.
Well, thank you, guys. And, pray for Trump. Pray that he has great discernment. Honestly, that's, if somebody wants to know, what can I do? Pray for that man, because he's got a tough job. So God bless you guys. Thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your families and your entire audience and everybody that listens to this. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. You guys stick around and watch us discuss the conversation we just had. God bless everybody.
Yeah.
Let me hold on. You're on mute real quick. Actually, you got to take it off because you're the one that said it. There you go. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
So much to break down there, man. And thanks to General Flynn for joining us and doing that interview earlier today. One of only a few interviews that he did throughout the day. And I think that it was well positioned in time that he came on the show, just because And yesterday he puts out his Digital Soldiers video. He puts out Get Ready. And then right off the tip of our interview with him, right? It was happening right during our interview when we're talking about sleeper cells. We're talking about that we're afraid something's going to happen. We hope we are wrong. Is we have a terrorist event that it takes place in the United States, in Washington, D.C., with an Afghan national, member of the Afghan army who worked with U.S. forces in Afghanistan, came over on the plane during the botched departure of the U.S. military from Afghanistan. And this man went up yelling Allah Akbar and shot 2 National Guard people in the head. And he was eventually detained. He was stabbed by a major in the National Guard who confronted him, and then shot by another National Guardsman, which, I mean, just hearing that story right there is heroic in itself. This major saw it, watched it happen, took cover because the guy came at him with a gun, saw that he was reloading his revolver, pulls out his pocket knife, jumps on the guy and starts stabbing him in the head. Well, the other National Guardsman shoots him in the leg and then in the butt, and then they detain him. And my thoughts on this, as I said it during the interview, we are witnessing MK Ultra 2.0. You know, the new decode for lone gunmen is MK Ultra 2.0. Is we are witnessing right now firsthand the activation of these sleeper cells. This was the first one, I believe, in my honest opinion, this was the first one of many more, that the Seditious Six conspiracy was intentional. It was what we're hearing right now is that the Seditious Six, this was well funded, this was well organized. Senators and congressmen don't just come together. That most likely the intelligence agency, CIA, was behind this. And if that was the case, then guess what? There's a reason for it. It was intentional. And this is the sow division and bring about dissent. This is to bring about people who will disobey unlawful orders. But it's also a constructive narrative, a scapegoat narrative for when you have National Guard troops out there that are given orders by some rogue, military member, a National Guard member, and then they follow through with those orders. Now they can hang the Donald Trump administration and impeach him and get rid of him. So this is a big setup. The stage has been set. The pieces are in place, and the deep state, the globalists, the international criminal organization, they're pushing back. And this comes right off the curtails. So this is interesting. Patrick Byrne put this out today. You had Lara Logan, who did this interview about the 2020 election, about Venezuela, the connections to Soros, Lord Mark Malloch Brown, all of this. We know that the funding, Smartmatic, headquartered out of London, right? So we know the connections between Soros and the Rothschilds. We know that this is who's pushing back, that this is what's funding the operation, the illicit operations that are going on. That is the hidden hand behind the cartels in Venezuela. But here's the key. Patrick Byrne put it out today that the reason they released this interview this week, this Monday, is because The Guardian did an expose on the information and was completely twisting it in a completely different bias. And who's the Guardian is nothing more than MI6, which is the hidden hand behind this. And I've been saying this for a long time. It's the old guard. It's the EU. And this ties into everything else that we're seeing.
I brought it up last night when we did DEFCON. I mentioned it in the interview with the general, and I'm going to bring it up right now. Morale is a weapon. We look at it as we acknowledge that in the military, but the thing people have to understand now is the digital battlefield encompasses all of us. If you have an electronic device in your hand, or you're in a computer and you're in this social media realm, you are in the digital battlefield, whether you choose to or not. You are. And I say this constantly. One of the biggest mistakes people can make is jump on X or Facebook or Instagram or in these different platforms and think that you're just jumping onto a social platform. That may be the face of it, and that may be the way it's marketed, but when you look at the apparatus that's behind it, the Mockingbird media, big tech, the intelligence agencies, not just ours, foreign intelligence agencies, NGOs, different nation states, anybody that has a dollar in the fight, big pharma, the military industrial everybody has assets deployed on these platforms. And at the same time, we're on these platforms, we're wearing these devices that are, and we have these phones with this technology that it's recording all our biometrics, heart rate, your your pulse, blood pressure, pupil dilation, all this stuff's being recorded so that they can. And I said this, so I think I said this with you. I've said it so many times. When they engineered Twitter, they brought in the people that designed casinos. They did this for the purposes of making this addictive technology. FOMO, the endless timeline that everybody sees on their different devices, that was designed in order to have FOMO. That's what and so and I say all that to say this is when you see these psy-acts happen to facilitate these psy-ops, if you're only looking at this as social media, you're going to fall victim to it. But if you look at this as this is a digital battlefield, General Flynn says, you have thousands in our government,
if not tens of thousands,
in our military, all deploying. Me and Josh, we talked about it at My Days Are Blending, man. I think it was last night or this morning. We're always talking. And one of the concerns that we had surrounding the seditious six was it was absolutely orchestrated, but what's the intent?
Right.
What was the purpose behind that? And, and I love the theory that Josh has on that. It makes a lot of sense. It's absolutely plausible, but it definitely was an indicator. And I know General Flynn said he didn't, want to, get people riled up on something we don't know, but it is common sense to think that were they trying to get ahead of a false flag that they can end up pinning on President Trump, because we see all these attacks coming in to subvert the support for President Trump. Because let's just be honest, the only one that we can trust in that institution of government that we have right now is President Trump.
Right.
And if they pull that man ability to do his job, we're in a lot of trouble. And I think General Flynn articulated that very well. And I just want to say thank you to the audience that joined us. Me and Josh were texting each other while the show was going on different things we caught and didn't catch in our notes. And he goes, "Man, this should have been on Badlands." And I text him. I said, "Yeah, boss man, their Badlands already chewed my butt out, saying why this on Badlands." And it was just this conversation, we're very grateful for it. It was orchestrated in a very short window.
Right.
So didn't want to have everybody move things around if it wasn't able to happen. But maybe we can find a way to put this on Badlands. So for everybody that's mad at Alpha for not doing that, my apologies, folks. But here's one thing I want to say. What was, watching this the second time, so not participating in it, but us being, part of the audience to watch it this time, what was one thing that stuck out to you that was like, oh man, I didn't catch that the first time?
John Brennan. So the conversation about John Brennan, General Flynn brings up a few different things. He says, number one is wherever John Brennan is around the world. This is interesting because John Brennan was just in Washington, D.C. like last week. This is when Thomas Speciale actually went up there and confronted him, and he was waiting outside the subway. We have those videos, but then Flynn says, Brennan wherever he is around the world. And I don't think that General Flynn was talking to us when he was talking about Brennan. I think he was talking directly to Brennan. And I think that he was hinting toward Brennan that I know where you are. We know where you are. We see you. And he says something's not right. And then he goes into his body language. He goes into, when he's on MSNBC and he's twitching, he's got this body language going on. Like he knows it's coming. And I think that that's really important because that tells me eyes on John Brennan. And I do agree with General Flynn that John Brennan is this orchestrator that is commanding the stay behinds. And if anybody knows what I mean by stay behinds, this is the infiltration within the intelligence agencies, within all the various different government agencies that work for John Brennan, the deep state intelligence apparatus that we've laid out, that are in operations. They are active, and that he is commanding this. And that, we had two different things that happened today. Another thing that happened today was that we found the call between Zelensky and Steve over there, right, about Ukraine was leaked this was leaked. This is a classified call, and this was leaked to the media. Well, who in the intelligence agencies leaking this call? That's a massive screw up. And how did that happen? Well, it happened because they are pushing back. They are moving pieces on the chessboard. And that I think what General Flynn is trying to say is that we need to be ready. Not only the anons, the digital soldiers, not only the citizen journalists, but the Trump administration. And that there are people within that Trump administration. And I think everybody listening, no matter what walk of life you are in, understand that there are gatekeepers in that White House. There are people who withhold information directly from President Donald Trump. And this is a no-no. This is very, very bad. And we kind of explained it a little while ago, and I'll explain it again on Q After Hours, a show that we do on Sunday nights on Badlands. We were having this discussion about Susie Wiles and about how Susie Wiles needs to be removed immediately. And I believe that Dan Scavino is positioning actually as the person doing all the hiring and firing within the executive branch was to groom him for this next position as chief of staff, because this produces the relationships that he's going to need if he becomes chief of staff. And you played this clip with the Defender of the Republic, of where she talks about this information that she got about how it was during the big, beautiful bill, and that 13 Republicans were holding out, and Donald Trump was pissed off, and he called them up and he's like, why are you holding out? Like, I told you to go ahead and vote for this. And they came back and said, you didn't get the memo. We sent the memo over. They changed the bill. And they said, we sent the memo to Susie Wiles, chief of staff, and Susie Wiles has it. Did she not give it to you? And from what I heard, he was pretty irate. So we made the prediction that Susie Wiles is going out the door. The next day, sure enough as shit, you know, we get the news going out there and everybody talking about, Paul Sperry was the first one to report this, that Susie Wiles is most likely going to be fired by the end of the year. And the White House said nothing. Trump said nothing. Nobody asked questions about it. Now, I think that this is actually a good thing. I'm not that I dislike Susie Wiles. She's, you know, associated with the Bush administration, associated with Netanyahu's original campaign back in the early 2000s. She's a lobbyist for Big Pharma. I could give two shits about the lady, but I don't think she belongs in the White House. I believe that someone who's competent and who understands the war domain that we are in right now needs to be in the White House and talking in the Donald Trump's ear and guiding him through all of this. I think someone who has to have the battlefield experience of understanding psychological warfare and various different SIACs and operations that are going on. You know, that's who we need in the White House right now, because that is the part of this timeline that we're in. We're in that part of the timeline where shit is about to hit the proverbial fan and people need to wake up. And I don't think that with people like Susie Wiles in the White House that we have the appropriate channels to Donald Trump to get the intelligence that he needs to make the decisions that he needs. And I'm just saying that I don't know Susie Wiles, and maybe she's the greatest thing since sliced fucking bread. I don't know. And I don't care, because you know what? The one thing I do know is she's withheld information. And this is just a repeat of what happened in 2020. Remember when the general counsel, Ciccolone, he withheld information. They stopped Sidney Powell and Giuliani from going, and General Flynn from going into the White House. They had to sneak in to give Donald Trump information. They withheld the information about the fraud of the 2020 election, and it's happening all over again. And it doesn't matter if it's a small little thing like the big beautiful bill. What happens when this is a threat to national security or a direct threat to the United States of America, and the intelligence is not given to the president in the right amount of time, or it's withheld from him completely? So we need to make some serious changes. And if anybody from the White House, the Oval Office, or President Trump or Scavino, or anybody who's watching this, you know, understand that this is a wartime domain. And I know they know this. And we need war fighters in those positions to be guiding and to advising.
I agree with you completely. But I also want to make sure that we also accept the accountability and responsibility we have as Americans.
Correct.
Because a lot of times, why do these things take so long? Well, if all we're doing is rant and raving on social media, then what do we expect? Are you making the phone calls? Are you sending the emails? Are you pushing, you know, people to be involved in the local politics? And granted, some of that stuff is, you know, the long-term solutions, but they still need to happen. With regards to Susie Wiles, listen, I always navigate this part very carefully. You know, and people, no, you did well. You did well. I read you very well now, and I enjoy doing these interviews and these shows with you. But one of the things is there's a difference between trying to subvert the president and being critical of the president. And what I would tell people on social media is, if the president does something you don't like, should you say something about it? Absolutely. He needs to hear you. But also recognize that there is a formal and informal operation, and I'll use social media, but just understand that it spans far beyond just social media, that there's a formal and informal operation to take these same concerns we have and use it to subvert the support for President Trump. It's the complain, but offer no solutions. What did you see with General Flynn? He has solutions. He has a game plan. He has a strategy that he can offer the president. When you have these people on social media that say, oh, I'm MAGA. Oh, I'm America first. Oh, I support President Trump. But then you go, and this is why I brought up during the interview, the conversation with the general, is when you go and you look at the historical data from these people and you look at their social media timelines, you look at their digital footprint, there's nothing there that highlights the good things that the president's done. There's nothing there that shows positivity into this administration. There's nothing there. And what you realize is what these people are trying to do is they're just trying to destroy. Again, I said this earlier, morale is a weapon. They're trying to destroy the morale, because if they try to attack Trump directly, it always gains him support. And they recognize this. And this is why they go after the people that surround him. And in the beginning, in the first couple of days, I said, this isn't warranted. You got to give these people time. And as the time moves on, we start saying, okay, you've had 6 months, you've had a year, you've had 18 months. There comes a period where you got to say, okay, you are not doing your job. And this is where we're at. You know, this is where we're at with that conversation surrounding Susie Wells. You know, this with Ratcliffe. Like, come on. How is this intelligence out there and you are not doing your job to stop it?
Well, we were with Jaco earlier, and he said this. He said, look, you just had the seditious six that comes out, and there's direct ties to the Central Intelligence Agency. And the first thing that you should see is the director of the CIA coming out and saying, hey, we're investigating this. We're looking into this. But nothing, crickets from John Ratcliffe. And that should be a red flag. I mean, don't get me started on John Ratcliffe. I mean, we talk about how through executive order, he was supposed to give an audit of the election on December 17th, 2020. He didn't get it to Donald Trump until January 20th, 2021. He withheld it, which showed direct collusion by China in the U.S. elections. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. So, you know, I don't even know why the guy is in part of this administration right now. But I think that comes about because of people like Susie Wiles, who helped Donald Trump go out there and hire people. And maybe that's part of the plan. But, you know, I wrote a post the other day called the MAGA Dilemma, right? The MAGA Dilemma. A pattern keeps repeating. People react to political decisions without recognizing the deeper structure behind them. Throughout modern history, one of the most destructive forces in American politics has been sycophantic loyalty. The blind, unquestioning allegiance that marked not only the Obama era and the Bush era, but every administration where personality eclipsed principle. The mindset is fundamentally at odds with what the founders envisioned. Parties were never meant to be tribes, Republican or Democrat, were never meant to override citizen judgment. A constitutional republic requires constant civic pressure, not passive agreement. Because if the people do not speak, the system will speak for them. If citizens do not assert their voice, the system asserts it itself. And the American system is built to preserve its own momentum, not because of one man, not because of one administration, but because of the two broad power structures that have evolved over the decades. This is the lobby, a coalition of multinational corporations, foreign interests, institutional networks, financial powers, and ideological pressure blocks. They operate with money, influence, leverage, and access. The next is the people, the vast majority of Americans whose influence comes from participation, the only force powerful enough to counter institutional drift. For 60 years, one of these groups has exerted pressure relentlessly. The other has spoken loudly at moments, but rarely with sustained, unified strategic force. This is why people often find themselves angry at individual political figures for decisions they disagree with. Yet the broader system remains unchanged. Outrage without organization becomes noise. Outrage without structure does not translate into pressure. Outrage without coordination cannot overcome institutional inertia. Across the political spectrum, there are citizens who express disillusionment with certain political decisions, but this raises an uncomfortable truth. Has the public allowed institutions to define their movements, their values, and their expectations? If the public believes an issue is critical, yet there is no coordinated civic pressure, no organized campaign, no widespread collective demand, then the system continues on its own default trajectory. Institutional behavior doesn't shift because of sentiment. It shifts because of force, civic, economic, institutional, and political. Whether a government official remains in power despite broad dissatisfaction, one explanation is structural. Institutions respond to organized influence, not scattered frustration. When certain advisors or bureaucratic actors wield more authority than expected, it reflects the gap between institutional power and civic force. In every administration, there are staffers, advisors, operatives who shape processes behind the scenes. Their influence grows when public oversight shrinks. Their decisions carry weight when civic pressure is absent. This phenomenon is not tied to one party, it's structural. The recurring problem is not Americans disagree with political decisions. It's that Americans often express discontent without the sustained organization that creates civic leverage. This is one area where many analysts note a clear asymmetry. The Democrats have mastered social organization, collective messaging, unified demands, coordinated action, and narrative pressure. The Republicans remain fragmented, passionate, but decentralized, loud, but not structurally aligned. In a republic, the system does not move because people complain. The system moves because people organize. The moment any large civic movement, left, right, or otherwise, learns to unify its voice, articulate clear expectations, and sustain pressure, the entire architecture of American power responds. It always has. People rediscover their authority the moment they recognize that silence is not neutrality, it's surrender. This goes back to the FLYNN interview when I said, look, Budweiser pisses us off, or Dick's Sporting Goods starts taking in the DEI, and what happens? We rise up in one common voice and we cancel them overnight to the point where the president of the United States is demanding that Cracker Barrel put back their old logos and put all the old antiques back in the stores. But yet, we can't do the same thing with Congress. We can't do the same thing by demanding Susie Wiles be fired or Pam Bondi be fired. We can't do the same thing by demanding complete redaction of the Epstein files. Why is that? It's not because of the institutional pressures from the lobby. It's because there is active psychological warfare campaigns out there that are dissenting our voices, that are distracting us, confusing us. They're diverging the MAGA, the America First, the Republicans, the conservatives. They are doing it on purpose because they know that the moment we become unified, we become way more powerful than they ever were or ever can be.
You know what it feels like, Josh? It's, I'm a dog lover for those that could be like, don't use a dog. I love dogs. You get a dog that has a bad owner and raises that dog from a puppy inside a chained, a chain link fence yard, right? Never takes the puppy to a park. Just all that puppy knows is that chain link yard. And on top of that, that puppy has a collar on its neck and a chain tied to a tree. And that's all that puppy has. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, owner comes out, feeds it, gives it water. That's it. That's the life. And then somewhere down the line, a new owner comes and moves into the same house and says, you know what? I'm going to take the collar and the chain off this dog so it can roam around the yard. And it does. Takes the collar off, takes the chain off, but the dog just stays in the area where it's always been. And the owner's like, what the heck? Let me take down the entire fence. And the fence is gone and the dog just stays there. Because the dog's just been with the mindset of it's been institutionalized to think that that's all that they can do is that routine. And I feel like that is what I'm seeing with Americans. You have a president that has come in and taken off the collar, taken off the chain. You have, whether you like him or you don't, Elon has provided a big tech platform where you can say pretty much almost anything as long as you're not violating TOS. But people are still afraid to speak. People are still afraid to do what you're saying. They won't do it unless you see something. And this is where it gets dangerous. unless all of a sudden people see something trending. If they see something trending, then they want to jump on board. This kind of goes into that mindset of FOMO. Now, the problem with that is who recognizes that? The intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
And the Mockingbird media. So then all they got to do is create the trending events. All they got to do is put in the influencers, put in the MAGA politician, put these people in, create. And what is that? It's controlled opposition. It's a word we've always heard, but have we always understood it? And now it's to the point where it seems like everybody is self-censoring, not just their speech, but their actions. You can make, like you said, with Cracker Barrel, we can make these very immediate changes to the lifestyle of America if we just do, organic movement. And I don't understand why people are struggling to see that or recognize it. I don't know if we're failing in exposing that, and maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe we're not doing our job as content creators, podcasters, influencers, whatever title you want to do out there. But it's something that needs to be recognized, to the point with Susie Wiles and Ratcliffe, to bring us back to that. If for whatever reason President Trump ever got to see this podcast, I'm a Marine. You point to the hill, I charge. I don't have to use a lot of brain activity to facilitate, my skill set. Josh was in the Navy. They wear the pretty white suit with the fancy little tie. But hopefully we can at least communicate this. Sir, if we're approaching a year into your presidency and you're saying, well, I want to present the American people with this information, but it's not making its way towards me, then my advice as just a man trying to do his job to help this nation is, then you get rid of the people at those leadership billets, like Susie Wiles. Whether she's a good person or a bad person, she's failed to do her job. Because if the people under her aren't doing their job, and she's not communicating that to you, there's a failure. If the people under her aren't doing their job because she's handcuffing them, well, then there's a failure. If you want to know if the people you've appointed, whether it be Cash, whether it be Pam Bondi, if you want to know if they're able to do their job, then fire the person that's been in charge of them. Plug in somebody new. And if you put in somebody new, like Dan Scavino or someone else, and all of a sudden you see the gears start to spin in motion, Pam Bondi's doing the stuff you've requested, why aren't people arrested? And she starts arresting people. You see the FBI start to facilitate the investigations at a pace that we all want. Then you realize that, okay, they weren't the issue. It was a person that was in charge of them. Now, if you don't, then you move to the next echelon. Then you get rid of Pam Bondi because that's Kash Patel's boss. And then all of a sudden, if you get rid of her and you plug in someone new, I don't know, maybe it's Matt Gaetz or someone else. They seem like they didn't want that guy in that position. And all of a sudden you see the FBI facilitating their job and doing what they're supposed to. Well, then, the issue was there at the attorney general position. But the one thing is for certain, if something doesn't change, nothing changes.
That's right.
And we are on a timeline as America. We're one election away from this country getting buried by the deep state apparatus. Which leads me into this, and I want to get your conversations. This was the one thing that I didn't catch while we were doing the show. In the conversation of Brennan, General Flynn says, now Brennan's not the leader. He says, but he's the operator on the battlefield leading their troops. And I was like, oh, President, there's some good actionable intel right there. If Brennan is the one that's leading these battlefield troops on their side, remove him from the chessboard.
That's right.
Arrest him, bring him in, put him under questioning. Under questioning where if he lies, that's a crime. And see if you can't start to collapse the deep states, their side of the chessboard by doing that. I found that very interesting that he General pointed at a very important piece for the deep state that's in play right now.
Yep.
Right now. And so I hope and pray that we see President Trump address Brennan. And I hope we see that sooner than later.
And you know what? I see that exactly because I was bringing it up earlier about Brennan being around the world and stuff like this. He is saying, hey, this guy is the one who's calling the shots on the ground. You need to get him out. And the question is why haven't they? I mean, we have 4 grand juries impaneled: New York, Pennsylvania, Eastern District of Virginia, and the Southern District of Florida. And I love Quiones, don't get me wrong. But the question is why hasn't an indictment went out about John Brennan? The 2 beginning investigations that Pam Bondi opened up into FISA-gate, the first 2 investigations we learned on July 7th, 2025, were John Brennan and James Comey. James Comey indictment only came for perjury, which should have been the release of classified information and not perjury, but came for perjury through the Eastern District of Virginia, and he had to put Lindsay Halligan in there just to get that indictment. But where's John Brennan's, and why hasn't John Brennan come about yet? I got a few ideas on this. Maybe it's because there's an active FISA warrant on John Brennan. Maybe that he's better off out there as an actionable figure where they can collect intel and find out the whole network. Maybe that's what's going on. Well, if it is, that it's time to act on that information, because it's getting very, very dire here, to the point where we just lost 2 National Guard soldiers, and this wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't a lone soldier. This is part of their plan. And, this puts, Flynn also said something. He said, Donald Trump and Pam Bondi came out and they said the word treason with the name Obama. He says, you don't say that unless you have, he was talking about DNI, Tulsi Gabbard. You don't say that unless you have verifiable evidence. And if you have the evidence, guess what you have? You have the ability for an indictment. You have the ability to go and arrest that person. And the question is why? Why haven't we seen those arrests? Now, I got lots of thoughts. I mean, could be active FISA warrants, right? We want to get the whole network. We don't want to get one singular figure. We don't want to just grab John Brennan and stop the leaking of classified information and all of these agents. We want to get the top echelon. We go to Obama. We're looking at Obama with a FISA warrant. Oh, well, there's someone above Obama. Well, we know it's a Soros criminal network. We know it's the money flow from Soros and Act Blue and all of this. Well, guess what? That's been under investigation for almost 9 months now. And you're telling me you don't have any actionable intelligence to go out there and perform indictments on this criminal organization? Come on. It's almost to the point where someone is protecting not somebody, but the system. And this is what I've said all along, why the Epstein files wouldn't come out, because it's protecting the system. And with the system that we're talking about here is something that the CIA set up after World War II with Operation Underworld, Operation Mongoose in Cuba, Bay of Pigs. They set up relationships with multinational criminal organizations, and they learned how to take illicit money that was generated directly from illicit activities, criminal activities, and funnel it into legitimate infrastructure, economic infrastructure. And the one key point that I'm going to point out here, and why they are protecting the system, and this is something that Alpha actually pointed out to me, is that because they've integrated that system directly with the global economy. The moment you take down that system, the global economy crashes and collapses. And this is what Donald Trump ran on. This is what Donald Trump's pride and joy right now is, the economy. And so you cannot take down that entirety of that system and dismantle it, because when you do 2 things: global economic collapse, and you engage World War III. Because the moment you have global economic collapse and you pull capital out of that system, you pull liquidity out of that system, which is kind of what we just saw last week, which most of the liquidity is just credit. But when you pull liquidity out of that system, the supply chain shuts down. When that supply chain shuts down, people starve. People don't have gas or fuel. People can't get to work. This leads to frustration. This leads to anger. This leads to protest. Protests lead to the ability to go out there and manipulate that into a color revolution, uprisings, eventually civil war, if not civil war, global war, because other countries start feeling the same pressures. And the only way to get out of it, as history has told us, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, is war.
And let me interject here with the cautionary thought, because I know there's a lot of people be like, well, let the whole thing burn down. Guess whose contingency that is? Not the good guys.
Yeah. That's the great reset.
That's the contingency for the bad guys. They are the ones that are positioned for order out of chaos. And I've said that a lot. The only way to strategically win that, and I love the fact that General Flynn had highlighted this in the conversation. There's tactical and there's strategic.
Yep.
And I'm I'm glad he introduced that into the conversation. It's something that I'm going to try to do, moving forward. But when you look at what Trump has to do, the tactical thing is, yeah, you bring the system down and it collapses, but the consequences of that, that can be very bad. And that's a conversation that we can do another day because it's an extended one. But the strategic thing for Trump to do is to put things in position that as he strategically collapses part of this pre-existing institution, there's a remedy there in the immediate aftermath to plug and play. And I think we're seeing him do that. I think that with the tariffs, I think we've seen him do that. I think with him, not getting us suckered into these endless wars. How many people were screaming, your kids and your sons and daughters are going to be boots in the grounds in Iran? Never happened. He's weaponizing, the big beautiful bill for mass surveillance. Didn't happen because in part it was already in play. All these things, and we've seen that every time they scream the sky is falling, it's not there. Now here's where we got to be careful. As we point out that they're always inaccurate about the sky is always falling, we have to make sure that we're not absent in that conversation to address the things that are administrative failures that are happening. We can't be blind to that either, because then that will hurt us. And I think those are things that we had in that conversation today with the general, like things happening, like you can't say this and then not follow it up with an arrest. You can't have, Susie Wiles in this position and political leaders, congressmen that were, you're not hearing about their position because that information was filtered from getting to you. I'm sorry, that's called sabotage.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about the economic system, and the idea here is that you have to build up a parallel system as the other one comes crashing down. And this is exactly what we've seen Scott Bessent, Donald Trump, Lutnick, all of them do since they came into office. They started to set up the strategic wealth reserve. They started setting up the strategic Bitcoin reserve and the sovereign wealth fund. They started to put all the pieces into play, renegotiating the world, going out there, renegotiating all the deals, bringing us to a trade surplus, not a trade deficit. I mean, we're at the lowest trade deficit that we've ever been to in the last 20 years. I mean, this is remarkable. We're making money as a country, which is great. But now we have to take that to the next level. We have to get around the central banking, the Federal Reserve System, because for everybody understands is that we're talking about the Rothschild dynasty. And people are like, well, the Rothschilds are no, they are not. Soros is their front man. I mean, they're still very much well in play. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was directly associated and within them. And yes, I do know that Donald Trump has financed many of his properties through Rothschild banks, but that's business. That's just business. That's where you get money and capital to do things, right? But what we have to understand is that they control the central banking infrastructure. The central banking infrastructure controls the liquidity of the global supply chain. If you have $1 billion of crude oil that needs to leave Saudi Arabia and go to the United States of America, well, Exxon or Texas Gas has to buy that. They don't have $1 billion to just give to the OPEC at that moment. So they finance it with overnight liquidity through central banks and large financial institutions. And then they pay it back slowly over time as revenue begins generated from that oil tanker. And so we have to understand that taking out the central banking systems, which is taking out the illicit criminal cartels and organizations that operate, crash the complete economic system and supply chain system, which eventually will lead to World War III. So you can't do it. You have to build up an ancillary system. And this is where blockchain actually looks promising, but we need to keep blockchain decentralized. We need to have a digital bill of rights. We need to preserve all of our rights, our constitutional and God-given rights from artificial intelligence, from blockchain technologies, because that stuff is moving really, really fast. And it's moving fast because I think they see the dire need to implement this parallel system and get it in place to where it can compensate for the lack of this old system that is getting crushed and collapsed. And maybe that's what they're waiting for. I don't know. I've always said this before, is that I disagree with a lot of the decisions that come out of politicians, especially the president and even Donald Trump. I'm very critical of Donald Trump. And I think that that's good and that's healthy as an American to be that way. But also, I'm not Donald Trump. I don't have the information, the intelligence that he's getting. I don't see the world from his perspective. I'm not talking with global leaders and understanding all the other information that is leading into his decision-making process. And so I respect that, right? But as an American, there's got to be some way to coordinate that information to us. Let us know that everything's okay. We got it all handled. We understand what's going on. We know that they're doing this. We know they're positioning. We know they're making moves, right? Because that's going to help the American people preserve our voice and speak up when necessary, right? And not speak out of line and get divided over dumb things that are being promulgated by psychological warfare operations that are being done on social media. And so I think it's really critical that we understand that, yes, there is a parallel system coming up and that we do need it if we're going to try to take down this whole criminal syndicate. But at the same time, let's see some arrests. Let's go out there and let's take out some of these dons and take out some of these commanders and these generals, because it's going to put a dent in their mission. At the very least, it's going to delay their next moves.
I think one thing that everybody can feel, it's in the air that something is around the corner. We got back from GART. We had the ability to talk to some important, well-respected people. And one of the things that was communicated was, the next 6-7 weeks we're going to be crazy. Well, we're about 2 weeks into that, and it's starting to definitely look that way. You said something right now when you brought up the Digital Bill of Rights. So I want to segue real quick, and then I'll bring us back because it's unrelated to this, but I know I'll forget. Last night following DEFCON, when me and Josh were debriefing the show and talking about some things for the future, we brought up the conversation of Edward Snowden, and we had Cheney, but we had a conversation surrounding JPB, John Perry Barlow. And what I would tell everybody is look for a future podcast show that me and Josh will be doing surrounding that, where there was some different perspectives that I think we both walked away from that on some of the stuff we read and studied. But to bring us back into this conversation, I know I would have forgot about that one, is he said Stephen Miller.
Yep.
And he said,
we have the clip.
Yeah. And I want to set us up for that clip. Like you said, and I agree wholeheartedly, we're not read in. We're not down in the Oval Office. We're not getting, the presidential briefings. We're not a part of that. So we're limited on making our assessments on, what we study, what we hear, information that comes from sources and connections, but we aren't in the network. But one thing that General Flynn recognized was that when Stephen Miller went and spoke on this clip that you're going to see with, I believe it was Jesse Waters, right?
Yep.
That when he went and spoke, he saw this evolution of the speak that Stephen Miller was using. Now, I agree, Stephen Miller is absolutely brilliant. If Stephen Miller has recognized that this is where his mind is now, then that tells me, he has Trump's ear and Trump trusts him, as I think he should. So that means this has to be at least, on, a Miller to POTUS conversation has had to have been relayed to him. So President Trump should be aware of this is kind of where we're at. So if you want to say whatever you want to say about it and play the clip, and we can talk about what he does say.
Let's play the clip and then let's discuss.
Mr. Miller, what should happen to the seditious six?
Well, they should be held accountable under the law and under the Uniform Code of Military Justice for a seditious conspiracy against the United States of America. This is completely open and shut, straightforward. What is the motivation? Why would 6 members of Congress, selecting specifically for individuals with a CIA or military background, record a carefully written, carefully produced, slickly edited video messaging directly to members of our clandestine services and our armed forces, telling them to disobey orders from their superiors, telling them that they should individually determine whether an order is legal or illegal and defy it. Individuals who are exercising life and death power. The CIA engages in covert missions all over the world involving life and death decisions. The armed forces launches life-taking missions time and time again. They carry weapons. They control drones. They control missiles. They work on nuclear submarines. For what purpose would you ever deliver this message? As you said, it's to create a color revolution. It is the CIA playbook for trying to foment insurrection from within the military and within the CIA. Look, we saw after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Jesse, members of the armed forces openly celebrating his murder. So think about that for a second. You have people in the armed forces, and it can be a tiny, tiny percentage, but who celebrated the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and then now they're getting a message from Kelly and from other members of Congress saying, defy your commanders. Rise up and defy your superiors. That kind of language will get people killed. It endangers our national security. It is dangerously radicalizing. And it has all of the evidence of willfulness and intent. And when they go on TV and they say, well, we can't name what order is illegal, that proves the point. It was never about the law. It was breaking down the chain of command. The Democrat Party is openly engaged every day in trying to tear down democracy, whether it be judges who are binding the president with unlawful orders, releasing violent criminals back onto the street, trying to cement and protect the illegal alien invasion of America, and now fomenting rebellion inside the ranks of our armed forces and CIA.
Boom.
I mean, one, I'm glad he put this was never about the illegal orders. You know,
Yep.
this was about, you know, fermenting the attitude of not trusting the president and subverting his authority. Like, you know, that's and putting everybody's life in danger. And this goes back to something, and we talked about this on the show we did with Jaco too, is, you know, in these SIACs and these PSYOPs, you know, you have the beta versions that come out first because they want to measure the temperature of the court of public opinion, the response, right? And, you know, this goes all the way back to what we saw break down in Southern California out here in my backyard with, you know, Customs Border Patrol and HSI and ICE and all them with the whole border, the illegals that were there. And, you know, you had the LA mayor, and there was a lot of stuff that was going on that I don't think people were recognizing. This wasn't just a, you know, a policy that was being fulfilled because of a promise Trump made on the campaign trail of deporting illegals. This was fifth generation warfare. It was irregular warfare that was going on there. You had local government and state government that has obviously is controlled by the deep state that was allowing this to unfold the way it was. Why? Because they knew based off of Trump's campaigning promises and moves Trump was making, like the troops at the border, that Trump was positioning himself to counter whatever they were going to try to do. So both of them understood this. And so you had one side that was like, all right, let's let this go. And how many troops will Trump commit to this?
Mm-hmm.
To what authority of use of force is he going to grant them? You know, how is he going to go about this? Is this going to be an executive order? Are we just going to throw, you know, are we just going to go posse comitatus? How's he going to go about it? Why? Because this was the beta test for who knows what was the intentions of No Kings, the Antifa things that were going to come out, all this. Well, I land that because that's something that we saw very early on, and we've seen the aftermath of that. Because now let's forward into what we're seeing now with the seditious six. They come out, they make this statement. I think we all agree with the way Stephen Miller articulated what their intent was. Why? And then all of a sudden we see this shooting from an Afghani that shouldn't have freaking been here. A look into his background should have never put him on a plane destined for America, but he's here and he takes out two of our National Guards. So what is both sides doing right now? They're looking at the court of public opinion. They're weighing everything. They're checking the temperature of this. Now the bad guys are doing it to see, is there enough outrage from this? Are there enough people? Are the influencers that we've bought and paid for? Is everybody sowing enough discontent against President Trump that we can now go and manufacture a much larger false flag that we're all concerned with? Like this is how that's played out.
Well, I think.
Well, I'll end the thought here. The only thing Trump can do right now to subvert that is he has to do to them what they did to us with January 6th. Why didn't you see anybody going to protest after J6? Josh, why weren't Americans going to?
Fear.
Because they knew if they did, what was probably going to happen?
They'd get arrested.
So Trump needs to do that to the deep state. Get these seditious six, arrest them, bring them in, have Kelly reinstate him so that he can go through the military side of it, so he can get through the military tribunals and look at sedition and treason and make an example out of these clowns, do it very publicly. So this way, any other politicians are going to be like, you know what? I may not want to do, I don't care how much you got me leverage. Look what just happened to them. I'm not going to go down for you.
Well, and Stephen Miller called it like it was. He said, this is directly out of the CIA playbook. This is a color revolution. And so what do we find happens today is we have the Afghan national that you just mentioned shoot the 2 National Guard soldiers. Now, Mike Davis comes out and he puts this out there. And this was actually Sebastian Gorka. And so we had the original post. Sebastian Gorka is actually the one that posted this. Mike Davis is just reposting it. And he talks about Afghan national, right? Kills him, and then we find out that this guy was also a soldier in the Afghan military. Well, guess who commented on this? And you're going to love this. He was much more than an interpreter. Trust me, this is going to be ugly. This isn't a law enforcement issue either. This is an act of war. General Michael Flynn.
It's serious, folks.
Like I'm telling you, it's very serious.
I hope people realize that this is it. Listen, you have General Flynn coming out saying that Brennan needs to be arrested. That statement alone, you don't think mainstream media is going to pick that up and run that all kinds of sideways? Of course it is. You don't think General Flynn understands that? Of course he does. Why is he willing to push it to a threshold? 1, because it's time, and 2, because that's the level of that. That's how much. That is where we're at. That is how dangerous things have become. You know,
yep.
I'm fired up right now.
Well, that I saw that and I was like, oh, exactly what we've been talking about right here is what General Flynn is now saying. This isn't a law enforcement issue either. This is an act of war. This was the first. This was a shot across the bow. Like I said, what they did the other day, the Seditious Six, this was intentional. Like Stephen Miller said, this was intentional directly out of the CIA playbook. Why? Because that's who we are dealing with. We are dealing with a rogue faction that is well-funded, trillions of dollars. Very, very old and ancient, been around for a very long time, well integrated within the corporate infrastructure, within the financial. They own the NGOs. They own the United Nations. They're all spread throughout the European governments. They have China in their pocket. They have Venezuela in their pocket. They have a private army that they snuck into the United States over 4 years with the help of Joe Biden's administration, who paid for it to happen. And they just took the first shot against the United States of America.
I'm with you. Let me just highlight some notes and then you can elaborate on any of these that you want. I just want to make sure we don't forget these while we still have a good audience watching tonight. Shout out to you when you brought up stay behinds. And I love the fact that the general caught it. And he said, it's a good way to describe it. So shout out to Operation Gladio. If you're not familiar with stay behinds, that's a very popular term within understanding that's a good thing. The other thing, 2 things we're going to have to address tonight. We've touched on them, but I want to make sure we put a bow on it for people to understand. Epstein's not going away, and I want to make sure people understand the dynamic of that. And you know my position on that, so I want to make sure we cover that. And here's the other one. This one caught, on the replay when we're listening to with everybody else. He says, when we've interviewed pedos in jail, the one thing that they had was a fear of the death penalty. Mm-hmm. Now, why that was interesting to me was I was like, why would the general team be interviewing people in jail already? Unless maybe you were trying to dig up some intelligence to, further take down those operations. So that was a That was a little nugget that I hope it's what it is. I hope there's
I think there's a lot of nuggets in what the general told us. And guys, I said it the other day. If you listen to the Lara Logan interview, we had Patrick Byrne on an interview last year, November 20th, 2024. And I posted a clip of that interview on my X account. So my X account's right there if people want to go check it out. In that interview, Patrick Byrne, he comes out and he talks about how the 2024 election was not what people thought, that they tried to steal it. They attempted to steal it. And he goes on to tell us how he thwarted the Venezuela election from actually going towards Maduro. And if you remember when Maduro ran against Gonzalez actually won, but they suspended the election and then they stole it and various different countries wouldn't recognize it and all this stuff happened. But what you learned from the Lara Logan interview is that General Flynn, Patrick Byrne, and many other people in a group of people, they ensured that this last election had a chance to be legitimate, and we're thankful that it was. And so we all owe General Flynn and a debt of gratitude, and Patrick Byrne and these people. And I don't care what people think of Patrick Byrne or General Flynn. They're like, oh my God. Listen, these guys spent an enormous amount of money, time, and energy and effort and knowledge and experience going out there to give America a chance. That's incredibly important. And so, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. General Flynn mentioned this, and I actually went out and General Flynn mentioned George Washington. And so I had to go out there after I did a short debrief with Alpha Warrior, and I had to research this. I'm like, Thanksgiving, I thought there was the Pilgrims. Like, I didn't know this was George Washington. And so I went out there and I started pulling up all this information about George Washington and Thanksgiving. And I'm like, I did not know this. And it was almost like General Flynn, when we were having the conversation, he's like, Donald Trump needs to come out and do a proclamation just like Washington did. And so I wrote this post on X that was reposted by General Flynn. And I want to read it for you because we're Thanksgiving Eve. We're going into Thanksgiving. And I want everybody to understand what was going on when George Washington made the first Thanksgiving proclamation. Okay. The year was 1789. The United States was still an experiment, fragile, uncertain, and trying to find its identity under a brand new constitution. George Washington had been a unanimously elected president just a few months earlier and had taken office in New York City, the nation's temporary capital. Washington spent his early months shaping the executive branch, calming regional tensions, and trying to unify states that often distrusted each other. During this time, Congress debated whether the new federal government should call for a national day of Thanksgiving, a practice that had previously existed only at the state and local levels. On September 25th, 1789, the first federal Congress passed a resolution asking President Washington to recommend a national day of gratitude. The request reflected a widespread belief that the nation had survived extraordinary dangers, war, financial ruin, and political division, and that the public day of reflection would set the tone for the new republic. Washington agreed. On October 3rd, 1789, in New York City, he drafted and signed what would become the first Thanksgiving proclamation issued by a U.S. president. The wording was prepared with help from his staff and most likely from Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson's office, though Washington personally reviewed and approved every line. His proclamation declared, Thursday, the 26th day of November, next to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being who is the beneficent author of all good that was, that is, or that will be. For the first time in American history, all states were invited to observe the same day of Thanksgiving, not just individual communities or regions. Washington's proclamation emphasized gratitude for the end of the Revolutionary War, gratitude for the newly adopted Constitution, gratitude for civil and religious liberty, gratitude for the opportunity to build a stable government, a call for national unity and moral reflection. The document was printed in newspapers across the young country, including the Massachusetts Sentinel, the Pennsylvania Packet, and the Gazette of the United States. Many state governors and local leaders endorsed the request, and November 26, 1789 became the first federally recognized Thanksgiving in U.S. history. Across the states, citizens marked the day through religious service, community gatherings, public prayers, family meals. There's no evidence of turkey, stuffing, or modern traditions. Those developed in later centuries. In 1789, Thanksgiving was primarily a religious and civic observation rooted in gratitude and national solidarity. Washington issued a second national Thanksgiving proclamation in 1795 during tensions with France and ongoing frontier conflicts. Again, he encouraged Americans to reflect on their blessings and remain united. After Washington's presidency, national Thanksgivings became irregular. President John Adams and James Madison issued occasional proclamations, but the tradition faded at the federal level until Abraham Lincoln in 1863. He made Thanksgiving an annual national holiday. Lincoln's proclamation closely mirrored Washington's themes, intentionally invoking the founder's precedent. Today, historian views Washington's 1789 proclamation as the birth of Thanksgiving as a national tradition, a deliberate act to unify the new republic, a foundational moment in American civic culture. The proclamation survives in several preserved manuscripts, including copies held by the Library of Congress, the National Archives, and historical societies across the country. In many ways, the moment America faces today mirrors uncertainty Washington confronted in 1789. He understood that a divided nation cannot stand, and that the work of a president is not only to govern, but to be steady, is to steady the republic, calm rising tempers, and remind citizens of the blessings they share. Washington used the idea of a national Thanksgiving to pull states back towards a common identity, gratitude, unity, and purpose. That same spirit is what this country needs now. We do not need more outrage or factionalism, but a leader willing to lower the temperature, bridge divides, and call the nation to remember what binds us together. A leader who can cut through the noise, call the country back to its foundations, and stand firmly as a president for every American, not just the ones who agree, but all who call this nation home. Mr. President, President Donald J. Trump, this moment calls for your leadership. The nation needs a unifying proclamation, just as Washington offered in 1789, to steady the country, remind Americans of what we share, and let the people know that you hear us.
And there's the picture.
And that's the picture from Valley Forge, where Washington, and General Flynn actually did a post after this, of Washington in Valley Forge with the troops calling for the first Thanksgiving as a general. And so he did this as a national or a proclamation to the troops at Valley Forge as a general. And so this is a long upheld American tradition that we're going into tomorrow. This isn't about the Pilgrims and Turkey and Indians. This is as American comes, people. And that's what we have to understand and remember. We're Americans through and through. That the founding fathers, they gifted us a nation with rights guaranteed and protected by our Lord, our God, and that if we stay silent, if we do not speak up, if we falter in the face of evil, we will surely lose it. And so the time is now.
100% agree with you. And I'm not beside the fact that that was written on the 26th and today's the 26th. You know, just coincidences, all just coincidences. Right. I think we can get into the Rumble rants because I know I got a few on this end. I'm sure you got some over there. I hope you have some over there. If not, then we gotta motivate some people to bring them on over.
I got gifted. Mega Nuke gifted 5 subscriptions. Thank you so much, Mega Nuke. I appreciate that. And then we had Texas Jules is now a monthly supporter. Appreciate you, Texas Jules. And I think I had one rant that came in, and we have RPG 3573 $20 Rumble rant. I hope the sting is administered by our side. I agree, RPG. So I had one Rumble rant. I appreciate that, guys. Thanks.
There we go. Shout out to Bear 1007 who had gifted 5 subscriptions. And shout out to Gabriel Blow, who had also gifted 5 subscriptions. And then let me bring these Rumble rants on the board because